What's up, everybody? Welcome to tonight's Digital Liberation Front Live, the case for reparations, economic logistics. Today we have Andy Kennedy, Seven Blackman, and Darnell Williams with us as we discuss the next phase of what reparations would be. But before we get into that, fellas, I want to talk about did anybody watch the impeachment trial today?
The impeachment trial?
Yeah. Andy, Darnell, you guys watch any of the impeachment trial today?
No.
Okay.
All I heard was that they were invoking the Chewbacca defense.
It was amazing. It was okay. I'm hyping up a little bit more than it really was.
Please.
It was really boring as fuck. But I mean, it was amazing whenever you look at it, like what the boring aspects were basically like legitimizing. Like pretty much today was just like the opening arguments for whether or not we should have a trial. Like that's what we were voting on today was whether or not Congress had the jurisdiction to try Trump because he's already left office. That's the argument. Remember when he was in office, the argument was it's at the end of his presidency. So, it's too late to try him. He's on his way out. And now that he's not in office anymore, the argument is you can't remove a president who's no longer in office. And so that was the argument being put forward by Trump's three? I think it was two or three attorneys today from his legal team.
Can I say one thing? A crime's a crime. A crime's a crime. I don't care when you did it. A crime is a crime.
I agree.
I think you got something. I think some people around some other places might have something to say about that historically.
I have to agree. I mean, can you arrest a man for speeding if he's no longer in his car?
He did the crime.
Yes.
He did the crime.
I mean,
that's because you know what you just said, Andy. I'm gonna tell you what you just said. You just showed us, and I love when you conversate. You just showed us two sides of America. Because if it was us, a crime's a crime, a crime's a crime. And like you just said, can you? That's exactly
I would say, as an addendum to that, is that a crime's a crime, depending on your income level. Right?
True.
If you are on the top 1%, a crime's a fine.
Exactly.
True.
Yeah.
Spoken very well.
That's what they say is like basically, if you're just fighting for crimes, then it's not a crime. It's more so a tax on the poor because the rich can get away with it and they benefit from it, where the poor have to suffer the consequences and incur whatever the punishment is, the full punishment, which we recognize with the insurrection, a bunch of people would have been dead. That would have been the full punishment on those Capitol steps that day.
Right,
So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's and we'll continue to see that this weird juxtaposition of what actually is happening or what actually goes on in the in the world versus what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And in a real crime, you are judged by a jury of your peers and not accessories to your crime. I'm just trying to say. It's like, okay, we have you on tape. It was you, Reggie, and Franklin. And
wait! Before you judge me, can I put my people in office to judge me first? I want to make sure that my boys judge me on what I do before I do the thing that I'm about to be judged for.
Exactly, Reggie, and yeah, they're in the box right now, and they'll be looking out for you as we make this argument, which leads to another discussion. I wanted to have. We're going to get to reparations shortly, but we haven't seen. I mean, during the entire Trump administration, we heard the left, we heard Democrats basically saying, don't worry about what he's doing right now. There are people in office who are taking, meticulous notes about everything that's potentially going wrong. And as soon as,
tweet.
the stroke of midnight hits, he's going to be escorted out, whether he wants to or not, in handcuffs. And
he turns back to Pumpkin Man.
Exactly. That's what we're told. And I'm upset. And I get you. I understand. Some people are like, well, it's been only 16 days or whatever, or we are literally almost a month into this, right? I mean, we are almost we're in a month. We're a month in, right? What date?
No.
So we're almost a month in. It's not just Trump who is just chilling in Mar-a-Lago doing whatever he wants to do. At this point, there's a bunch of people that we know were corrupt. Betsy DeVos, Steve Mnuchin, what's his face? The Nazi he had underneath him, who looked like a vampire. Stephen Miller. We had all these people that we knew were doing dirt behind the scenes, and nobody, and the arguments that the AG has not been installed yet. Merrick Garland is not installed yet to prosecute at the federal level, I guess. But I was always told that the federal level didn't matter because, for Trump at least, because impeachment didn't matter because the Senate was never going to convict him, blah, blah, blah. But state level crimes were supposed to be in play all over the place and ready to go. And I haven't seen that hammer drop.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're still dealing with a cacophony of senators and politicians who are still in office, who are vying fighting for their political lives at every turn, I guess you could say, to of course to their own detriment, especially in this case. But but what I'm saying is that they're basically tying their train to the Trump train, and so. For better or for worse, they saw the crowds, they saw the support, they saw the outpouring of, people who were ready to die for whatever reason for this man, and they want some of that. They want some of that. So at the same time, it would behoove them all to, of course, follow the law and make sure that the law is, followed to the letter, and perpetrators are prosecuted to the extent of the law. It still makes more political sense for them to say, hey, ease off of this, man. I got to run in 2022. I got something I need to make sure I take care of. I got some some political coffers I need filled, man. They ain't going to fill themselves. What are you doing? Nah, I got to send out this collection plate.
So with that being said, Andy, using your political crystal ball and tying it into this discussion tonight, Darnell fell off, but I'm pretty sure he'll be back. Using your crystal ball in regard to financial, implications, how do we even make this case of reparations, possible or accessible to, individuals whenever we recognize half of Congress isn't going to be on board?
Well, and I agree, right, that we have to talk in these terms of living in the real world, right? Because, have you noticed the GOP? So that's always going to be an issue, right? But I think when you have reparations talks, you almost need to come to a understanding with the people you're discussing this with about macroeconomics and the way that the U.S. government funds the military-industrial complex every year without raising taxes, or gives tax breaks to billionaires without raising taxes, right? So automatically, by saying money's not an issue, we're not going to talk about money, because the two number one things that people push back against reparations is our country's broke, we can't do it, and I don't want my taxes going up.
Yep.
Right. neither of which will happen if you understand macroeconomics. So you have to get to a place where you can come to an understanding about that first before you can even have that discussion, right? The same thing that they talk about with Medicare for all, with student debt forgiveness, with the Green New Deal, with any progressive policy that is being pushed, right? It's always that question of how are you going to pay for it? Well, we have to do a better job of telling people and showing them how that doesn't matter. It never matters. The Fed made $20 trillion available to the stock market to keep it afloat at the beginning stages of the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Not a word was spoken about that by either party. It just happened, right? We have to understand that the pay for question doesn't enter into this. If you can get to that point, then you can have serious discussions about it, right? So you can get rid of 75% of the arguments against it.
Okay, so you're saying paying for it is a non-issue. It's a non-factor. We should not worry about paying for it.
Well, it's only a factor when you figure out and to break it down to its basic economics level, especially for people that don't understand MMT. Mm-hmm. If you're going to give people money, whoever that is, right, more money than they would normally have, mm-hmm. there have to be enough things in your economy to be purchased by that money, right? That's basic supply and demand economics that you don't even have to understand the pay for question to even answer. If we're going to decide on an amount of money, a check to write for whoever is deemed to be receiving this payment for reparations, you have to make sure that there is enough goods and services in the economy to absorb that extra spending. So the money of how you're going to pay for it isn't the question. It's the resources that are in the system, because if you don't have enough things for people to buy, then that's when you talk about hyperinflation. And that's always the issue. We understand what inflation is and what hyperinflation is, mm-hmm. but we're not always clear about what creates that hyperinflation. And it's very simple way. It's not about the insurance rates that the Fed sets every morning. It's not about how much money, anti-MMTers will say, well, if we just keep printing money, it'll be worthless. That's mm-hmm. never an issue. That was due to the gold standard that disappeared in early in the 1900s, right? Mm-hmm. So that's got to be always brought into the equation about a large payment to a certain group of people in society, are the resources in place to absorb that spending.
Okay, so we have enough resources, or not resources, I guess, like goods. We're not just talking about resources, you're talking about goods and services, correct?
Absolutely. That's what I mean by resources, right? Like if you have, let's say that, and I'm not going to suggest any numbers, but let's say that the payment is large enough that pretty much every recipient in the country can go out and buy what you would consider a big ticket item. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you don't have enough of those things in society, that's where you get a problem, right? Because then prices go up because demand goes up and supply goes down. Right? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest point of it. Now,
well, maybe that's the argument is like, if we gave, because considering the fact that, when we're talking about reparations, we're talking about, going by a Sevens, statement, adult descendants of slaves. That's what we're focused on them exclusively, right?
American descendants of slaves.
American descendants of slaves.
Adult descendants. Right. No children. No children.
No children of slaves. American descendants of slaves. All right. So we can train.
Sure.
So we do American descendants of slaves. And what are, based off of the numbers, what are the numbers that we're looking at right now that are estimated in regard to American descendants of slaves?
Let's see. Well, they range anywhere from as low as, and now you're talking about in totality or per person?
In totality. In totality,
Okay.
how many are we talking about cutting the check to?
In total, oh, how many people?
Yeah.
Oh, 1,300. We're talking about roughly 40 million people.
Okay, so 40 million people. So
Yeah,
40 million people
yeah.
suddenly get. I mean, how much money are we talking? I mean, just guesstimating. Will it like in regard to how much?
Anywhere from 13 to 40 trillion dollars.
Okay, so we're distributing $40 trillion among the 13 million people.
40 million.
$40
million among the 30 million.
Right, who are 13% of the population.
Got you. So if everybody is able to, for instance, take their money and go and buy, a home,
sure.
Then do we have enough homes, for every single? I mean, 40 acres and a mule. That's what we're talking about initially when we talked about compensating the slaves, who were freed after the Civil War.
Well, I mean, I guess there. So I've read a couple of different articles. I'm sorry?
Are there enough acres? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, considering at the time when they were initially thinking of when they were initially talking about this, there were 4 million slaves.
Yeah.
So if there were 4 million slaves and each was to get 40 acres, I mean, you do the math, that's 160 million acres. And it seems like they had enough. I mean, so especially considering the amount of land that's been relegated to government, government areas, government sanctions, that's been given out to farmers and homesteaders as part of the Homesteader Act. So there has been land that's been given out. We've seen this given out, and there is a lot. But I'll go as far as saying that, like, there isn't a set understanding of how that could be actually calculated. That's why I said the range is different, because some people are going by your example of 40 acres and a mule, right? So some people are going by, okay, well, what will the value of that be when we're talking about, what does 40 acres represent in today's dollars? What does a mule represent? Not only does it represent farm equipment, that's transportation. If you eat, that's maybe that's food even, to a lesser degree. So that's why the range is so big, and so I think that needs to be understood. That's why that exists. So it could be as much as just 40 acres and a mule. It could go as far as what was the actual value that was brought to some of these corporations who benefited as a result of their participation. What percentage of GDP were they? So again, it's various angles that they're looking at this thing from. So I just wanted to make sure that was outlined.
No, I appreciate all that. That's part of what I want to have the discussion about is, what goods and services are we talking about receiving? And then also, what goods and services, would be, provided, by, the government. Because as far as just handing out checks, that's one thing. But then you're also talking about, systemic issues within our financial system that would be exploited. I mean, we got, redlining and all these other things that have been done to prevent people from taking the wealth that they have, growing the wealth, purchasing land in places where it will go up in value. Of course, land normally goes up in value, but like prime spots of land and whatnot.
Sure.
So how? That's what logistics is about. How?
I mean, yeah, and I question the how as well. I mean, just because, and from kind of a slightly similar but different angle. So, taking into account the theory of MMT, and saying, okay, fine, we don't have any sort of barriers in terms of paying for this thing. Okay. And so if there is a mechanism that's available somehow that will allow people to, or allow the racial wealth gap to be closed, I'm thinking that would be a great thing. However, common space, I wonder about the fact that we still have people who are are in positions of power, who may have no money, have no skin in the game whatsoever, but I just don't like you. I don't want you or your kind living here. I don't want to give you or your kind anything.
Mhm.
You can have all the money you want, but the money's no good here. What do you do about that?
True.
That's
Andy.
a very valid point. That's a very valid point.
That's
And
like, sorry, go ahead.
no, please finish your thought.
Well, I was just because I got up early this morning. I was like, okay, because I've been doing a little MMT studying on my own, and so I was like, okay, well, let me get deep into this. And I was looking at some of Mitchell and Randy Ray's videos and stuff, and checking out some of their information. So I felt like I was getting, as far as I'm not going to sit here and act like I got it, but as far as the gist of it, I'm like, okay, I get this. This is a great thing. However, there's nothing in place that will attacks the mechanism of racism, and that still will be in place. I keep referring to it, and because to me it's valid. I think about that first or second episode. I think it was the first episode of The Watchmen when it came out, when Regina King's character had her Redford dollars because they had been using reparations, and she was paying, I guess, child support or something like that to some guy. I can't even remember what the whole thing was. It just stood out to me that the guy was like, "Oh, what are those Redford dollars?" And it's almost like, I don't even want your money because it's that money, And
Yeah.
so that's what. So I think that's a real attitude that we have to understand and kind of act against now before we even get to that point. How do we do that?
Well, this is something that I was thinking about, a little while ago, and I wanted to bring to the conversation that I think that based on the current situation in American politics, that you have two things that are going to automatically happen right away as soon as you start to discuss serious discussions about reparations. Number one, there is going to be a large contingent of people in society that think that they deserve it, that aren't getting it. And number two is the pundits to that, the GOP or whoever is against reparations are going to co-opt that and try to use it against you, right?
Oh, yeah, we'll see some $5 slaves not in a matter of time, I'm sure.
Well, and that's the biggest thing. So how do you get people to seriously talk about reparations in a way that's going to help people? Because you can cut all the checks you want, but does that mean that, Seven, if you get in your car tomorrow and you're doing 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, you get pulled over by a police officer, are you no longer going to fear for your life? Right? Does that help the systemic issues in the country? And a check doesn't do that.
Right.
And I would submit that in terms of a check, just a check, that there are a contingent of, especially people in the South, that would say, well, I'm angry because now this could affect my standing, my taxes, my that, and enrage them even more to act worse than they already act, right?
Sure.
So that's the whole idea. Yes, exactly. So my biggest thought about all of this is that the reparations discussion needs to be part of a larger discussion about progressive policies in general, right? Because if you can instill progressive policies that are colorblind, right, that don't have to pass the paper bag test, that are just for human beings, like Medicare for all, like a federal jobs guarantee. If you guarantee as a right to every single adult American who wants to work and is able to work, then you can effectively get rid of racial profiling when it comes to hiring people for jobs, right?
That was Bill Mitchell's.
Yes, absolutely. So if you can instill a lot of these different policies and work towards a more just society, right, then you take the emphasis off of the people that are against reparations, right? Not only are you talking about compensating people that need to be compensated, but you're also taking away a lot of the mechanisms that allow racism to begin with, that exist to begin with, right? And I think that that is part of the larger conversation that we have to have.
Well, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that, you know, has been a point of contention between individuals who support, you know, reparations and I guess like from a fundamental standpoint, and then individuals who support reparations from a symbolic standpoint. Like, you know, there are many ways to, I guess, like allocate, you know, these resources and make sure that these targeted communities are being reached. But the symbolic standpoint argues that, no, we also have to reference the fact that, you know, this money is being reallocated because of this, and this. You know, slavery is an important thing that is being repaid. You know, so like that, I guess that's where the two, you know, ideologies butt heads is like, you know, yeah, if I put together a package that addresses low-income communities, education, financial planning, free college for individuals, educating my citizenry at low or no cost, like that is going to address all of the issues. You know, reparations was designed in part outside of, you know, actual land or a car, the mule. That's going to fundamentally address some of the issues. Healthcare, Medicare for all. That's going to address these issues that are plaguing the Black community, those adult descendants of those American descendants of slaves.
Man, you know, we're together eventually.
But then at the same time, you know, you're not saying you're not excluding anybody, because American descendants of slaves are not, you know, some poor white family in rural Alabama, but the pre-existing form of reparations I'm talking about might actually benefit them. So when it comes to implementation, we can be exclusive or we can be inclusive. But if we are inclusive, we're negating the slavery component. If we're exclusive, we're reinforcing that experience and legitimizing, you know, the perspective of one group of people. But then once, like Andy's saying, you might end up with a target on your back because now it looks like those Black people, you know, are getting benefits where nobody else is getting these kinds of special privileges.
Exactly. And if the larger discussion about is bringing in, you know, more progressive policies that help more people, like I was talking about Medicare for all, you know, get rid of the possibility of people going into medical debt, into medical bankruptcy, right? You pay for people's college and university. You wipe out all of the student debt that's occurred to this point, right? You're freeing people up. A job guarantee, you set the limit of the least amount of money that's like a minimum wage, but with benefits, and you work in your community, right? These are all things that help everyone. Then if you're going to talk about reparations that help a specific people in society, it's not as big a deal to the other people who are benefiting from the change in your new just society, right? And I think that that's a very important factor in that. We talk about, you hear lots of people on the left say, well, we got to, you know, instill these policies or whatever so all boats can rise, right? Well, there's a shit ton of people in our society that don't have a boat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I'm a huge, I remember Kamala Harris being one of the ones, she's one of the people who's behind that theory, or who behind that rhetoric, I'll say, in terms of talking about, you know, just saying how, you know, I'm of the mindset, you know, how she always sounds like somebody's drunk. She always sounds like somebody's drunk. But she said that, and I was just like, well, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I could have swore the Titanic is a boat, and water's been rising like a motherfucker, and we haven't seen the Titanic. We haven't seen the Titanic just pop up out the water yet. Anybody else? I don't know. Y'all let me know. Well, I was just, I was kind of interested, or I thought it was interesting thinking about, so out here in Kansas City, and I think he's nationally syndicated, there's a sports columnist by the name of Jason Whitlock. Fox News loves this guy. He thinks the answer to everything is money. So it was just interesting, hearing you guys, say that isn't the answer. That isn't the case, because in his mind, he was speaking of, in particular, about when LeBron James first moved out to LA and somebody spray painted, the N-word on his house. And I think LeBron's response was a tweet or something like, even in this day, I still have to worry about, racial, issues or something like that, something to that effect. And even with all that, Jason Whitlock's response was, how can a millionaire care about social issues? You got money now.
Exactly. It doesn't change anything, right? It obviously doesn't. What was it, Chris Rock, who said, I'm a famous black guy. I trade place with a unfamous white guy any day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, this whole discussion has to hinge on aiming, putting a bullseye on the entire understanding of how racism is ingrained in American society since before it became the United States of America, right? That's you've got 200 plus years or 450 plus years of history to undo, right? A check is not going to do that.
No, it's
asking too much of a check to try to undo all of that history, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time too, just like if you hand out a check, handing out a check would be great, but if you don't have a population that's able to utilize that check, appropriately because they're not educated, you're just basically setting, a bunch of people up to be, hustled and swindled out of that cash, and it's just going to go right back into their hands. Like right now, we're talking about these $2,000 checks that we still haven't seen.
It's not $2,000 checks. It's $1,500 checks.
Plus 6 if you got to 6 before, whatever.
Which actually should only be $200 checks if you think about it, because Trump did give, I think, he gave money. What was it, $1,200, and then he gave another $600. That's $1,800. So really, they only need to give $200 to get us to $2,000, basically.
But by St. Patrick's Day, it's going to be 50 cents. 50 cents off.
Everybody get a 50-cent CD. His first CD.
Yes, and it'll be that country song, I'm proud to be an American.
Or it'll be his 50 Cent's first song, How to Rob.
So,
I've always been partial to Ludacris's Candy Shop, so
that's a classic. That's a classic.
That's 50 Cent.
I'm old. I'm showing my age.
Candy Shop is 50 Cent too.
Candy Shop, but I do prefer. I do love a good move, bitch. Get out the way. That was a very, very, very moving. That song.
Yes, and that was a song that moved. That was moving. That was moving.
Many a bitch was moved out the way. Many a bitch was moved. But that being said, we have we have a population that doesn't understand proper money management. Even how the free market operates and whatnot. How to invest in themselves. I'm not saying that people of color aren't financially literate, but when you're talking about people who are just educated in general, you can't say there's a number of people who don't have the same opportunities as others. But table that for a second. I want to revisit what we were talking about earlier, and what we were talking about earlier was how other people outside this group, are going to perceive this gesture. And if we're trying to get, that's why I was talking about Republicans earlier, and basically this completely split environment where we are politically, if we're going to get this realistically now, is going the route of exclusivity or inclusivity better based off of, these are the people we have to work with. And so if I go up to a bunch of racists and say, hey, I need you to get on board with this plan that's going to give this community that's owed, trillions, So a bunch of us are going to get trillions of dollars, and you're going to get nothing. But I need you to argue for it just because it's the right thing to do. Selling that is significantly more difficult than, hey, you and I.
I mean, we pushed free Tibet, and that was a movement.
But did we really free Tibet? That's what we have all these.
I'm just saying, there were people here who were marching in for that. There was a whole group of black people who were moving for when Mussolini freaking invaded Ethiopia. I mean, that happens, and that was before the internet. So I'm just saying, like, so it happens. We can. It's very quite, or I should say, it's quite possible. You know,
I'm not arguing that both arguments can't be made. I'm arguing the success of those arguments. Like we saw people marching for free Tibet, but is Tibet truly free now? Like it's not. Like we got the Uyghur Muslims right now who are literally getting genocided in China. So we got problems. And once you start talking about Hong Kong and what they're doing down there to crush democracy, like we had a lot of marching. It felt really, really good. But nothing really came out of that. And I don't want that to happen to what we're trying to do in regard to reparations. I mean, we've had people march for reparations. We have people that ask for reparations, beg for reparations. The community that, deserves it more than anyone else, those American descendants of slaves, have argued for this for a good amount of time. But we've been third time out of 3 billion. But we've been arguing for this for a good minute. What is that like? How do we need to change the argument?
You have to change the rules of the game. It's the current political environment doesn't allow this to happen, right? There's too much neoliberalism still in society. As many advances have been made by, the movement, the revolution style politics of Bernie and his ilk. You still haven't met critical mass yet. Right. And that's the problem. There's still too many people that think in terms of free stuff, bootstraps, guns and God, don't touch my stuff. It's just the political environment still hasn't changed enough. Right. In order to have a constructive conversation on this, we still have to move the Overton window in the opposite direction that it's been moving. As far as I'm concerned. I'm not trying to say that you can't have those discussions, but realistically, you've got, Sleepy Joe's in power now, but there's every indication that he is going to be just another neoliberal austerity president. Right?
Oh yeah, no, very much so. Like I mean
he's a centrist by nature.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, no, he's a Republican by nature. He's a centrist by party.
He's like the original centrist, right? Like he's been doing this since the 70s. I would dare say that before Reagan, the father of trickle down economics, right? So that's the problem, is that that Biden administration is going to continue to say we're broke, we don't have any money, we're not going to get China to pay for reparations because that's the only way we can do it, right? So that's your hurdle. If that's going to be 4 years, or is that going to be 12 years? If it's Biden for 4 and Kamala for another 8 after that.
I like that.
Well, that's the thing is like, is how will they even make it? Will Biden even make it 4 years? Because he's not going to appeal to the progressives. Everybody's going to see what you're seeing, what you all are both saying right now. He's a centrist. He's conservative. He's not going to make the drastic changes that are necessary to, actually implement some of these policies, which will get, reparations and some of the other progressive things that have been asked for. So with that being what it is, in 2 years, there's going to be some kind of, from what I predict, there's going to be some kind of split that's going to happen in the Democrat Party. Biden's not going to make the accommodations. The progressives in the party are going to be like, we gave you 2 years to meet some of our demands. You've only met maybe 1 or 2, and we have what's significant more. So since you're not going to work with us, we may have to split off and do our own thing. I anticipate that's going to happen because we're already seeing that same fracturing happening on the right in regard to the Trumpists and, the classical, conservatives who like saying the N-word behind closed doors.
Since when did they start closing the doors?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, what are you talking about?
Well, there is a classical conservative that prefers their
the ones who drink with the pinkies up. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
They say the N-word with the pinkies up. There you go.
Exactly. Those who talk about welfare queens. There's that group.
I mean, I think Joe is of that school. I mean, from jump anyway. But I think it's interesting. I just saw this on somewhere on socials today, and it's really interesting how the goalpost keeps moving, even for whether it's a neo-lib, whether it's a Republican, it doesn't matter. We'll always move the goalpost, or people will move the goalpost for the team that they would like. Period. Mm-hmm. So it's like. So the first one, you and I have had conversations about holding Joe's feet to the fire and all that, right? So it says here, so these are like the 5 levels of Joe. The first level was, we don't have time for this. We need to defeat Trump. Wait until after Biden's elected, and then we can push him left. Next level, Biden won and you're still complaining? Can't we at least take a day to celebrate before we start pushing him left? Next level, come on, Biden's not even in the White House yet. Wait until Biden's been inaugurated and then we can push him left. Now, this is where we are today. Biden was just inaugurated. Give him a chance to fix things. Let's wait until after the first 100 days and then push him left.
Yeah.
And then the last level says it's not the right time. We need to focus on the midterms. We can push Biden left after the 2022 election is done.
Because Trump is going to get off, and so if Trump gets off,
dude,
when Trump gets off, he's going to run for office again because he can. Now, we can talk all about. And that's what I was saying earlier. Even though you can't prosecute him at the federal level, or there's some federal, we don't have an AG, and there's nothing going on at the state. People are saying the state district attorney's office of New York or whatever, they're waiting for impeachment to be over. That's what the carrot is now.
Unless they're going to start extradition, it doesn't sound like they're about to go get them.
Exactly.
so whatever they're talking about.
So and then he could technically run.
The only time I want to try to push Biden left is if he's just to the right of a cliff.
Hey. Hey,
oh, well, that's the thing is like, so Trump gets off. There's nothing saying that you can't run for political office while you're incarcerated.
Wasn't it Bolsonaro? I can't remember his name, but there was some. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. Was it the Italian president or prime minister who was like impeached or imprisoned and still got reelected?
Yeah, no, and not just that. There was a drug lord in Mexico. Was it Mexico or was it? I can't remember. I remember reading about this drug lord who basically negotiated his own incarceration and how he was going to be incarcerated, but he still ran the city that he was from. I want to say it was in Colombia. I'm pretty sure it was in Colombia. But yeah, like there's a point where you're able, if he's able to do whatever he wants to do from behind, like fucking prisoners can't get cell phones in prison, but dude is still
get organic food.
That
sorry, I had to.
One thing that I haven't even heard discussed yet, that if it comes true that Trump actually, gets prison time, right, and goes to prison, they give him an orange jumpsuit. Like that's just an orange blob now. Like how can you distinguish his features from his outfit?
He'll look like a candy corn. You know, white up top,
same shape,
yellow in the middle, orange all down here.
Will he get the same? But that's the thing too. Will he get the same access to cosmetics? You know, I mean, he does his own hair, all that stuff.
I mean, at that point, he'll probably just have his own nationally funded or nationally sponsored hair care brand that if that he'll from his position of authority that he'll make all Americans have to use, and it's only one kind. And if it doesn't work for your hair, then you're not the kind of American that he's looking or working for anyway.
And you're sitting on the back of the bus.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Right. Back there with your
You got to think that Trump sprayed that shit on himself for so long that his skin has to be stained now, right? He doesn't even need it anymore.
Chemically stained. That's probably what we're looking at. We're probably looking at a permanent chemical stain that he augments with little makeup. That's probably what we're looking at. But yeah, so I mean, as far as reparations is concerned, there's going to have to be, I guess, like in my opinion, some expansion in regard to like if we're going to get it now, like if we're going to get now, because that's what I'm trying to say is like we're going to have to pander to some of those people on the right, some who maybe more extreme, but they're also extremely poor. And we can say to him, look, I know you hate black people. I know you hate brown people. I know you hate everybody, darker than a sheet of paper. That's cool. That's fine. I don't agree with it, but there's a way we can both get this money. And if we can both get this money by going down this route or whatever, your people will be happy about it. You'll have more money to buy crosses to burn, and we'll be able to, address some of the systemic inequity that we've been worried about for some years now. Like, I mean, that feels like that's the argument that can be made. But I don't know.
That's obviously the major stumbling point, right? It's the political climate. Mm-hmm. Right? You can. Is there a way that you can use the anger in society? Because there's not a lot of people right now in American society that aren't angry, right?
Yeah.
There's the brunch crowd, and I think that's about it, really. The pink pussy hat crowd. They're the only ones that are happy. You've got an entire legion of Trump supporters that are walking around aimlessly right now. And you've got all of the progressive left Bernie Sanders supporters that are walking around aimlessly, and they're all angry.
You know what we need? We need a leftist version of Q. We need whatever. We need to pick a letter, and then we need to start our own, leftist, fake religion thing or whatever to fight Q.
That's it.
Pull some of those Q extremists into. I don't even know what the letter would be.
D. No, V.
You know what it is?
Make sure we get the ladies on our side.
It's D for Jimmy Dore.
V.
He could be our Q. Right?
Jimmy Dore could be okay. All right. Well,
I do think it's kind of interesting that Andy alluded to Dave Chappelle as the leader of the KKK. If you got hate in your heart, let it out. If you got hate in your heart, let it out.
But I'm with Andy. We gotta wield that emotion because that's basically how they built, their movement was, off of pure, unadulterated, ignorant ass rage. And
that's what I was gonna say. The rage is ignorant and it's falsely. I remember that that quote. I can't remember it in its entirety. I'm sorry, but the one that says basically if you find a white man, show a white man he's better than somebody, he'll give you he'll give you his money or something like that.
For you.
Thank you, that one. And dude, how many gun companies are raking in the dough for their fear? How many ballistics companies are coming up with this is the new deer shooting implementation weapon tool that also has a sniper scope and the ability to shoot your deer at a range of 7 miles away, and a rocket launcher just in case. And it allows you to shoot 78 rockets in a matter of 3.5 milliseconds. So
just in case you get attacked by a flock of deer. Just in case a bunch of
well, no, just one, because you can't have too much. It's for your family. You're only hunting for your family, right?
It's going to take you at least a couple of days to set up all the claymores and landmines.
Absolutely. And you got to get yourself a deer blind. You got to get that. I mean, and deer blinds ain't cheap.
No. Have you ever priced out camouflage paint?
Jeez, absolutely. I mean, unless you're getting it from the Army surplus store, which I don't suggest you do because it's used. Only get it new. We've got new camo paint over here.
Yes, we're selling a discounted pre-dried camo paint.
Yeah, just add water.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. At the end of the day, but we're going to have. I mean, we need to address systemic inequity in some shape, form, or fashion, and wealth disparity is not going anywhere anytime soon. And it seems to be we're in a position where it's incentivized for us to focus on the things that separate us versus the things that bring us together. But anger seems to be a running through line. Anger seems to be a constant.
Not really, because people are mad at different things. Black people are mad about completely different things that white people than like the MAGA crowd is mad about.
But I think the reason is I think the end result is the same. Like people are tired of feeling like they're getting the short end of the shaft. And then
but here's the thing. But that's the thing. It's like you can feel like that's the thing. We're talking about feelings versus facts. Like you can feel like the world's falling down on you. The world's falling apart and blaming you. Everyone's losing their head and blaming it on you. So like you can feel like that all you want. It may not be the actual truth.
Yeah.
Like and that's the thing. Like and I'm not saying that black people are the soothsayers of the country, but like we aren't afforded the luxury of fantasy.
Yeah, no,
I get to live in truth. You see, we have to live in truth. So like when you sit and talk about, well, I'm oppressed and I have a $350,000 house and my four trucks and my all of this, and I'm still oppressed. How?
Yeah.
Like what version of oppression is that? What part of the oppression game is that? Because we have yet to even reach that peak. So let us know like if there's a a peak or mountain or something like that of oppression. Obviously, we're still at the bottom. Trying to and just meandering, trying to get our way out of it. You know what I'm saying? But so it's like, so are we saying that we'll have to quell, I guess, the fire of the middle class who want something, just so that way they don't run into the reparations line and say, hey, I'm black too? Or why do they get it and I don't? So we don't have a repeat of affirmative action? Is that what we're saying?
The other thing that I think that needs to happen is there needs to be a real reckoning of mainstream media, right? That we have to stop having the CNNs and the MSNBCs controlling the narrative, giving the spotlight to the haters, right? The clickers and the sharers, right? And getting real stories out there of why people are actually hurting, what's actually happening during a pandemic, and telling the truth for, like it used to be 5 decades ago, where there was actually a guy. There was a guy, I forget what his name was, Walter Cronkite, I think it was. He actually came out and just told news stories without any spin, right? They were just telling things. We have to get back to that. We have to the mainstream media has to stop being the mouthpieces of corporations and dividing people, right? We need to start talking about what we have in the same instead of what we have as differences, right?
Then that goes back to the fact that we're in a capitalist system, and a capitalist system it thrives off of competition, and our media and division.
No, it will what's the word? I can't think of the word. Not disparity. Crap. Keep going.
Disparity created by false scarcity. So
scarcity, that's the word. Thank you.
So disparity created by false scarcity. So just like Andy and just like Seven, you all been saying, there's enough to go around, but we're given the impression that no, there's not enough to go around. So you need to guard everything you got. And so, those people over there are asking for more free shit. Those people, want more stuff for their team and everything. And so that's what we're arguing and we're constantly fighting against as we're talking about addressing healthcare, reparations, equal rights, and whatnot. We're always being told there's not enough of everything. When we recognize, like, there's a whole mountain of that shit over there. Like, what are you talking about? Well, that's not for you. That's for those people over there. So since that's the case, like, it really comes down to us being able to, qualify and establish, like, how we're going to allocate these resources, identify what the resources are, and basically convince everybody that, it's going to be okay. There is enough to go around. This is where education comes into play. Educating people about, like, MMT theory and whatnot, and saying, hey, what you think about inflation is not true. Because I consider myself a pretty educated individual, and I was always told, you print a bunch of money, then that's going to drop the value of money overall because you got so much money. I mean, look at Argentina. Like, I was somebody who at one point in my life would have bought into that bullshit about how the value of money decreases or increases based off of how much has been printed. But
right.
Because I've been able to educate myself further, I know where to be educated. I associate myself with educated individuals like Seven, like Andy. Seven's frozen right now.
I think he's just being contemplative, right? He's just
he's thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
but he'll be back. But because I associate myself with individuals like you, Andy, like Seven, I am more informed, and it feels like that's the big gap that has to be breached. First, is just educating people and getting people into at the same table where we can acknowledge, hey, these are the issues that we have that we share. Because the impression right now is that we all don't share the same issues. And like someone was saying, we're all fighting for different things. But at the end of the day, is like, if everybody has all their needs met, and in a capitalist economy, that means everybody has capital to meet their needs. If I have money, I can go buy food. If I have money, I can go buy a bigger house. If I have money, I can go buy, a car. Capital. That's what I need.
Yes.
So regardless of what your complexion happens to be, you still have. You can address why everybody's trying to win the lottery. That's why everybody's trying to get GameStop stock. That's why everybody's trying to throw all their money into fucking Bitcoin, because everybody's like, how can I get more capital? And color has nothing to do, with that.
Exactly. If you can get a conversation between, a white person and a black person, and that they can start to understand that their lives are more similar than they are different, right? That they both love their families, they both take care of their families, they both work hard, they don't get paid enough money. They're both worried about their futures because they could go into medical debt, or how are they going to pay off their student loans or whatever. When we start as a people to understand that we are more similar than we are different, is when we start to break down these differences, right? When we stop listening to the forces of the government and of the oligarchs that want us to be divided, right? Yeah. That's a huge thing. When that message starts to come across, and we start to make positive moves in a direction that get people the help that they need, that give people a chance to have a good life, right? then we take the emphasis off of reparations, and then you don't have as much resistance to it. Then you can have serious conversations about reparations for the people who should get it, right?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, I know that right now it would be nice if somehow you could convince the powers that be that reparations is a good idea, but it doesn't go to the root cause of why it was necessary and why it happened to begin with, and why things right now aren't any different than they were, 400 years ago, really, in terms of the hatred that's out there. So,
which is why I feel like it has to start from the ground up. It's not going to come from the top down, because exactly. I mean, that's one of my issues in regard to BLM, is like it started as a ground up movement, and then BLM got co-opted by neoliberals, pushing for this agenda that wanted to use it as a platform for getting more exposure for them to get elected and into office, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But once they get into office, now it's like let's wait. We'll resolve these issues in due time, in the sweet by and by. And now that movement feels stagnant now. And is even used as a slur by the right more than it is by something that is supported by the left and to be realized, to have goals that are tangible and realized. There's no representative of BLM in Congress right now, but there are representatives of Q. There are representatives of Trump in Congress right now advocating for far-right extremist agendas. Where is the representative for BLM if that was a leftist movement co-opted by neoliberals who basically said, we hear you, we're going to address your needs, we're going to take care of you when we get in office? We don't have anybody doing that. And so I feel that's why I fear in regard to reparations is like, we start this ground movement, but without the support across the board from the bottom, it can be co-opted again and utilized as a political tool come 2022, come 2024.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that there's a lot of things that are in place that are in play that have to change before we can get enough people to seriously talk about it, as far as I'm concerned. And that discussion has to happen. It has to, right? It's ludicrous to me, even what's happening and why this is even necessary, because I just don't understand it. I can't get my head around the hatred of why you would feel that kind of hatred for someone just because their skin is a different color. It's something that I've never been able to understand, and it kills me when I even think about what people go through.
What are you saying?
I said spiders. If you think of it like how people think of spiders, they may have never seen a spider. They don't, maybe they've never encountered. Maybe they've only seen it in a picture, but they know they have a fear of them. And there's nothing that's ever happened to make them afraid of them. They just know that.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah, absolutely.
They look like that, but same
and
way.
The only movies they've seen are Eight-Legged Freaks, Arachnophobia.
That's it.
That's all they've seen.
And an Australian documentary.
And Snakes on a Plane.
Exactly.
Right.
With Wesley Snipes, for all people.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I guess it's like a branding thing. We've got to adjust our perspectives about the different brands that we've been told exist out there as far as people are concerned. This is the black brand, this is the white brand, and this is what to expect. So the generalizations that we impose on other individuals is part of the problem. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of depressing when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. But the thing is, in order for us to recognize the problem, it's like, okay, yeah, we got a mountain to climb. All right. Well, is that one of the Appalachian Mountains? Or are we talking about Mount Kilimanjaro? Okay. Well, it's Mount Kilimanjaro. I hate to tell you this, but yeah, that's what it is. And some people may not even make it to the top. Like Martin Luther King literally, made that statement. I've been to the mountaintop, but I may not get there with you. I've seen it, but I recognize it's going to be such a long climb that I'm not going to make it.
To the promised land. Yes.
Exactly. So if we could all acknowledge this is a long haul opportunity for growth.
But the thing is, that, like, just like you were saying with, just like with Trump and his sycophants, right? So we've got two, if not more, I would say like full-fledged psycho crazies who are like full-on, QAnon Trump supporters, and probably got a gun rack in the back of their Prius right now. So we have so it only took 4 years for them to get radicalized, find a new city to move in, like Marjorie did, because she doesn't she and all her business is nowhere near where she represents, but she just moved there because the incumbent decided he didn't want to run anymore, and so she was like, prime opportunity, let's do it. Only 15% of these people got college educations. Perfect. I love the poorly educated.
They sound like they're right up my alley.
Absolutely. So I'm just saying. So it didn't. But my point is, it didn't take long for her to go from somebody we just was like, hey, look, here's another Facebook crazy, to, oh wow, here's a Facebook crazy who now is an elected official. You see what I'm saying? Nation of Islam hasn't moved that fast. Where's the Nation of Islam representative? Where's the NAACP person? Where is the, what I'm saying? Like, where is that person from the radicalized side who is also, who's the jelly to their peanut butter?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, the closest thing we have, would be, the Congressional Black Caucus, which is basically just a representative of the Black bourgeois.
They call them the boule.
Exactly.
The gatekeeper nigga. Black folks.
The black bourgeois. That's all it is. They're a representative of those freed slaves from the North.
The Clyburns of the world. We like to say, oh wait, no, Joe, you losing? Hold on, let me serve up these black folks for you, hot and ready. Whoo, I've been cooking them all day, Joe. I've been cooking them all day, boss. Woo, here you go, boss. How you feel?
What was that? Popcorn? You shake the popcorn thing on the stove, a Jiffy Pop.
Yeah, that's it. And all the black people popped for Joe when he was losing because if you go back, he was losing up until South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Until Clyburn let everybody know that if you don't vote for Joe, you ain't black.
Right. Serving them up over here, boss. Serving them up. Hold on. They cooking.
If you're a good black, you're gonna vote for Joe. If you're a good black, you're gonna vote for Joe.
A good black.
That's 0 to bad shit in 6.4 seconds.
Mm-hmm. And because of how we've been programmed, especially, those who, come from, those more affluent, middle class, black backgrounds, we Democrats called us, we shall come. And that's what happens, which makes it.
Morgan Freeman just recently come out and say, there's no racism in the U.S. Look at me. I said to the TV, I said, you're an idiot, and that's goddamn right.
I mean, there's as long as there's an incentive to ignore the problem, it's going to continue to exist, and that's what makes reparations that much more difficult. Ignore the problem, but then still exploit it, benefit from it, but try to convince as many people as you possibly can that there is no problem. Whether you're on the left,
you have built-in scarcity and also exposed capitalism.
I mean, in all honesty, it's a recipe for insanity in my opinion. It's like you're supposed to pretend like none of this stuff is happening and go about your life as if everything is normal.
That's what being black is like in America.
People that want change, it never changes fast enough. But over the last 4 years, I think that the Trump factor has accelerated a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of good things, not just bad things. Like we didn't have open conversations about MMT outside of real progressives, even now with Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth book that's just come out. And, more and more people, one of AOC's best friends is Andres Banal, who is an advocate for MMT at the New School in New York on Long Island, right? They know it. They understand it. I don't think that AOC is currently taking the best tact to what people need right now. I think she's trying to take the Bernie lead and, play the game. Like,
Sure.
And I think what the left needs right now and the people that identify as progressives want is even just a modicum of understanding that they have even an ounce of power in society right now, because all of that has basically drained away. And for the most part, because of Bernie Sanders dropping out of the race, right? There is a huge contingency of progressives that are aimless right now because of the lack of leadership and the lack of organization on the left, right? That I think that Miss Nina is a wonderful thing to happen. I think she can continue in the same vein as Bernie did in organizing on the electoral politics side, but that's just a single direction, right? We need directions from everywhere coming at us, not just in electoral politics, because the system is set up to weed out the non-elites, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to come from the ground up. It has to come from the side, the top, the bottom, everywhere. But we're starting to have the conversations that make that possible, right? That's positive. That's very positive. Do we have enough time before the earth blows up and we all die? I don't know.
I mean, honestly, it almost feels like a stall tactic. To your point, it almost feels like a stall tactic. Like they're like, oh yeah, reparations. You know what, man? Let me
here.
Right. I had that around here somewhere. I think I left it in the car. But listen, reparations, right? Yeah, we'll get right on that.
Right.
I gotta go.
The new dream. Yeah, well, that's right.
They're like, wait, but the global warming, though, man. Don't you care about that? Isn't that more important? Wait, reparations, so it's all about you right now? Global warming. Hello, that's everybody. Come on now.
That's like when they were talking right at the beginning of Trump's reign, that they were talking about to white people in the South. They said, how do you feel about Obamacare? Well, I hate that. I love ACA, but I hate Obamacare.
Oh my God, yeah, that was amazing. Or I'd even take it as far as like, those shows when they're like, no. I was at this seminar once. Oh my gosh. So I do real estate on the side, but I was at this seminar. There was a guy named Andy who was telling people how to sell, right? And he gets all emotional and he does these shows and things. Now, mind you, he prefaced the entire show by saying, I don't want to do a question and answer thing. So I'm going to try to go all the way to the time. So that way, when it's done, I can leave. He said that from jump, but it was weird how he got to the end and it was like, he was really starting to pull people in with this emotion. And I could see him counting the time. And it's almost like, he was like, yeah. Oh, and you really you have to understand, people, that like every one of you has so much inside of you. End time. Okay, so I mean, that's exactly how it went. And so like that's kind of how it feels like when it comes to reparations. And like, oh yeah, but man, we ran out of time, but on our next show.
That's right. If you need me, I'll be in my car somewhere. Yeah.
Right.
The cliffhanger. Okay.
It's always a cliffhanger.
Always. Well, I think thank y'all for coming out tonight and supporting me on this. We lost Darnell, but I want to thank him for being out here for a short period of time too. But yeah, Andy Kennedy, 7. Thanks for
the one we lost.
for the fallen homies. Homies. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, 7.
All right. Take care.
Peace.